Hey, psst, you want some of that fantasy news flow? Welcome everybody to another episode of Fantasy News. I am your disheveled goblin host, Daniel Green, and today I am so happy to go ahead and start it off on a little bit of a personal note, and that is that I was recently on the One Piece podcast, which you can check on out, and I am now caught up on One Piece, which means I am very confused, because it turns out after putting down the series for a year and a half, you forget some stuff. So I would just recommend if you start One Piece, commit. That fits in perfectly though with the plan here on the channel, which is to restart the series and do a walkthrough in a similar style we did to Berserk next year, and hopefully try and get done by the end of 2024. In the meantime though, would you be interested in seeing me going ahead and giving my thoughts on Wano and Egghead, or you just want to hold off and wait for the restart? Let me know in the comments down below, but now let's go ahead and get into the brilliant flaming sword of fantasy news. I'm not sure what that means either. And you know we gotta kick it off with some cover reveals, and we have 3 today, because last week I asked you whether or not the amount we revealed was the right amount, and it was kind of perfectly evenly split between more cover reveals, the same amount, and less.
That didn't help me at all.
So we're gonna go with 3 today. The first of which is going to be The Daughter's War by Christopher Buhlman, with cover art by Mary Bergeron. Described as being set during the war-torn goblin-infested years just before the Black Tongue Thief. I just have a quick question. If you have a minute, perhaps the opportunity to tell me, what makes it an infestation of goblins? What if it's just their home? This prequel will be hitting shelves June 25th of 2024, and I actually really like this cover. It's a safe choice to go with red, white, and black. I think that's why you see that combination in everything from fashion overall to tech YouTuber aesthetics. But here they've done a really good job balancing it, and I like the usage of red and white flames in the bottom to kind of balance the covers from top down. I just think this cover is a success. The next reveal though was for Asunder by Kirsten Hall, with cover art by Greg Ruth. Described as a thrilling standalone dark fantasy novel that reads like For the Wolf meets Sabriel. We choose our own gods here. And this one I'm really torn on, because on first glance I thought it looked outstanding, but the more I looked at it, the more the overlaying of the hands within the character being portrayed just didn't work for me, but overall, I do still like it. And no release date was noted.
That's weird.
But we are going to finish off the cover reveals with one from Patrick Leo, friend of the channel here, who got to reveal the cover for Kavithri by Amon J. Betty, with cover art by Joseph Gibby. This one is described as an underdog story. Kavithri is inspired by Kaladin, Berserk, Bridgeburners, Vagabond, and Evangelion all have a big influence to this South Asian epic fantasy trilogy. It's going to be very common to say about this cover that it serves Kill Bill vibes, because person wearing black and yellow with sword on cover, I think beyond that, it is in a very common style to see now, but it still has an impact. And the purple in the back with the flames would not be something I would have called working as well as it does. Are you a fan of bread and hearing things? Then you might just be as excited as the Rhaeria Revelation fans in the audience to hear about Michael J. I'm sticking with it, to hear about Michael J. Sullivan's recent post, where he has given a look into a return to Royce and Hadrian's adventures, saying, as of October 2nd, it has been 5 years since the last Royce and Hadrian novel. The following is my very rough first draft. That means it's before alpha, before beta, before copy editing, before gamma reading. In other words, it's a rough. But it might be interesting for people to see the creation process from where a book starts to where it winds up. And I completely agree. I probably sound like a broken record at this point, but I think the more authors that do this kind of stuff, the better. The artistic process should be on full display for people who are just interested, to those who want to attempt themselves. So good on you, Michael J. Sullivan. And yeah, if you like some bromance style fantasy, the Rhaeria Revelations fall into so many tropes that scratch itches we all desire, while having just rock solid friendship at the bedrock of it. But the link for it, of course, is in the description down below, right below the like button, as MKBHD smoothly says. Wink. And rolling a nat 20 on how much I love this next piece of news, the SPFBO finalists were announced, which I enjoy for 2 reasons. 1, it's just badass fantasy self-pub community content, and 2, it's absolutely horrible for all of your TBRs. And that just tickles me.
It keeps getting bigger and bigger. doesn't go away.
For those of you who do not know, the SPFBO is the self-published fantasy book-off where a whole lot of people from the community get together to vote on the best self-published fantasy book of the year. And with the rising popularity of just self-pub fantasy in general, this list is getting more and more combative, and I'm happy to say this year's finalists look extra sexy. But before we get into it, shout out to RG9400 for putting together this little write-up for me. You did not have to do that, and you are awesome. If you would like to contribute to news stories you see covered here in Fantasy News, just join the Discord server and post what you want to see covered in the Fantasy News channel. The first finalist for SPFBO 9 is Master of the Void by Wend Raven. In the Seven Lands, magic is everything. So what happens when you're the only person who has none? Next up, we have Wickwire Watch by Jacquelyn Hagen. Trust no one. It's the first and greatest rule Inkwell Featherfield ever learned. Then we have The Fall is All There Is by C.M. Caplan, described as all Petre Mercy wanted was a good old-fashioned dramatic exit from his life as a prince. But it's been 5 years since he fled home on a cyborg horse. Now, the king, his dad, is dead, and Petre has to decide which heir to pledge his thyroid-powered sword to. Then we have, biting its way into the finalist, Daughter of the Beast by E.C. Greaves. Fear not the beast in your stories. With a stout blade and a stouter heart, become the thing they fear. And that is my favorite cover of any of the finalists. But then we got The Last Ranger by J.D.L. Rosell. Betrayed, hunted, left for dead, but not even death itself can keep the last ranger from vengeance. I like this one because I'm picturing death like, dude, slow down, God. Coming in the latter half, we then have The Last Fang of God by Ryan Kirk. When gods refuse to die, it's humans that suffer. And that is my favorite start to the description. I'm not able to get through all of them, I do apologize, so I just grabbed the first couple lines. And the next one getting that treatment is Murder at Spindle Manor by Morgan Stang. Mysteries abound in Spindle Manor. And our third to last is Cold West by Clayton Snyder. Bastard, killer, husband, father, his wife cold in the ground, and 2 young boys to feed. Will Cutter turns to what he knows, violence. The penultimate finalist is Hills of Heather and Bone by K.E. Andrews. The bones of the dead hold stories. And our last finalist is A Rival Most Vile, my favorite title of any of the finalists. 2 potion shops, 1 heated rivalry, until hate bubbles over into something else. And this one I am adding to my TBR because, I don't know, it's just the one that struck the chord with me the most, but congratulations to all of the finalists. That is so exciting. And I know a bunch of you just added a whole lot to your carts in the affiliate links down below if you want to use them. I'm not saying you gotta. And I know I basically asked for this because in the last episode of Fantasy News, I covered the story of George R. Martin being like, don't harass me about my books. And people sent me that a bunch. So I was like, this isn't even really a news story, but I'm gonna cover it because so many people sent it to me. So now people are just gonna be sending me George R. Martin's tweets because I also got sent this meme actually from George R. Martin. And to add something to this, I actually do believe George R. Martin is really working on Winds of Winter. I don't believe he's been doing it since like the show started and we haven't gotten a new book since then. But since around the start of COVID, George R. Martin has been talking about how he's really buckling down, trying to get to it. And all signs do point to that being true. And he is possibly under more pressure than any fantasy author for a release before him in terms of there not just being sky high expectations for this guy to follow up his best-selling series, but also like provide a better ending than the show delivered. And any idea he had that ended up in the show is of course going to be considered like kind of spoiled. I have more sympathy for Martin than I feel like a lot of people display. And if I had to shoot my naive shot at guessing when we actually could get Winds of Winter, I would put my money down on like 2027. It is a book maybe I'm naive, I still do believe we will receive someday. But in terms of books you can receive far faster than that, Wraithmark Creative today launched their Kickstarter for the 3rd and 4th arcs, I believe, for Mother of Learning, in both hardcover and paperback. And of course, you can get the first 2 arcs through backing this as well, just like you can still back my Kickstarter for Neon Ghosts through Backer Kit. Please. And for the next piece of fantasy news, we're going to be jumping into the Rebel Moon updates. No, this is not related to the lawsuit we talked about in the last episode of Fantasy News. Updates on that kind of stuff tend to take a bit longer, but instead, this is a greater exploration of how this franchise is trying to be set up to be the next big thing before the first movie's even out. Now, we already know that the film was split in 2 to be put on Netflix. It's also going to be simul-released in theaters, and there's going to be available, I think, just on the streaming services, a PG-13 version and an R-rated version. The reason they have decided to split the film, aside from just being able to release 2 movies at the box office and make more money, is according to Netflix film chairman Scott Stuber, on the service, under 2-hour movies really do better for some reason. And I just love how much that quote sounds like some YouTuber who just figured out that shorts get more views. I don't know, they just do better. But I'm not saying that's necessarily the wrong decision. Originally, they actually wanted to cut the longer film down, but Zack Snyder had a problem with that. So this way they're able to keep all the beats Zack Snyder wants and just release it in 2 shorter films. But we've been reassured this split wasn't done haphazardly, and the 2 edited cuts are because this is something that is attempting to step into that Star Wars space, and they want to be able to get the younger Star Wars audience, but also entice the more mature Zack Snyder audience who's here for an R-rated film from him. I will call it a solution. But the interesting part of this is, yes, not only is Rebel Moon set up to have multiple cuts from one movie that's been chopped into, but also just from go, before the first film is even out, yes, there's already an animated comic planned. The board game may be happening, I'm not sure at this point, and an animated series. More. Reshooting what I said here, because I just want to say it a little bit more eloquently. I know there have been attempts at just creating franchises out the gate like this before, to various levels of success. But it just seems like Rebel Moon 1 is having a whole lot more happening with it than most, and also is not getting as negative a response as I've seen some attempts at franchising like this before. Maybe it's because people are fans of Zack Snyder, maybe it's because just the trailer looked good, I don't know. But despite how over the top the push for Rebel Moon seems to be, with it coming out and still, I think, December 22nd, people don't seem tired of it yet, and I know pretty much everyone I've talked to is just really interested in what the movie's going to turn out to be, for better or worse. But it inevitably feels kind of distracting to me as well. I just think of that gif with like Peter and the fire hose. I'm trying to be like, oh, I'm excited for this movie. I am excited for the Rebel Moon movie, but it's like I'm then being asked to be excited about all these other things that, no, I don't know if I should be. Maybe I'll hate it. I don't know. And in some quickie news, I'm sure people will have strong opinions on, we have seen HBO's Dune miniseries change its name from Dune the Sisterhood to Dune Prophecy. This isn't the first update we have had for the HBO Dune miniseries. It has recently lost a director and one of its stars due to creative changes, but I've been covering fantasy news long enough to not give strong opinions on that, because I've seen productions that have been very turbulent release things that are fantastic and vice versa. But while researching this story, I did come across a whole lot of Dune 2 promotional images I hadn't seen before, so I'm just going to take a moment to have a lot of those go by in case you all haven't seen them, because a lot of them looked really neat. I totally forgot Christopher Walken was going to be in Dune 2. And in some news that some people will respond to by going, "It's over now." Well, others will be like, what's the big deal? I don't understand. Attack on Titan has officially come to an end with its show. And the funniest part of this to me is Crunchyroll crashed due to the level of rumblification that happened upon the episode's airing. While we're doing some quickie news though, I'm gonna go ahead and knock out of the way that yes, House of the Dragon Season 2 is set to premiere in the early summer of 2024, to which I must remark, cool. But in the final and my personal favorite story of the day, NASA is officially launching its streaming service, NASA Plus, November 8th. Yes, their streaming platform will be rocketing to most services in just a couple of days. The official announcement tweet reading, "We launch more than rockets. This month, we launch our streaming service, NASA Plus over at nasa.gov/plus. No subscription required, no ads, no cost, family friendly. Emmy award-winning live shows, original series on most major platforms. That's just so cool! Seeing the day and age we all live in now actually utilize the technology available for good and provide 4K footage of like a rocket launch or footage from a space station to kids who could be inspired to then reach into the stars for another generation. It gives me hope. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy. I love that. Yes, I also plan on getting stoned on my couch and watching NASA footage for a few hours. That's gonna be awesome. But before we close out the fantasy news, quickly a shout out to a book written by one of you goblins. And for today's indie self-pub promo, we have Eternal Future, Book 1 in the Weight of a Dream series by J.D.L. Pitched as subversive sci-fi inspired by Zelda and Doctor Who. Trapped in a foreign robotic body, a robot awakens aboard a spaceship without memories of the past. Their soul, along with many others, were given to an organization called the MK-ED, a company that specializes in the transformation and examination of potential greats. They were robbed of their identity, but through existing, they will find it again. A kind doctor and the person that led them aboard the ship hold the answers. But this has just been your latest episode of Fantasy News. Like and subscribe if you have not already, and hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. I got books, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Goodbye!